The Galactic Empire was a monolith of power, a titan that had subjugated countless species across the Milky Way. Its ships were vast and intimidating, bristling with weaponry capable of reducing entire planets to ash. It thrived on domination, spreading its influence like wildfire, smothering resistance wherever it arose. For centuries, the Empire had expanded unopposed, until its scouts stumbled upon the Sol system. At first, the humans had seemed insignificant. A single habitable planet, a few terraformed moons, and a smattering of colonies in neighboring systems. Their fleet was small compared to the Grand Armada of the Empire, their technology primitive by galactic standards. But there was something unnerving about them, something that didn't quite match the patterns the Empire had come to expect. Their ships were sleek, angular, and deceptively simple. Their colonies showed no signs of submission or fear. Most unsettling of all, they greeted the Empire's first emissaries not with reverence or terror, but with faint smiles. The Empire's leadership dismissed the warnings. What threat could such an insignificant species pose? Humans would bend the knee like all the others. If they resisted, the Empire's might would make short work of them. The Emperor himself decided to make an example of humanity, eager to add another jewel to his collection of conquered civilizations. A fleet was dispatched, a massive force of battleships, carriers, and cruisers, their hulls gleaming under distant stars. Commanding them was Grand Admiral Valen, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, whose name was whispered with dread across the galaxy. As the fleet approached the Sol system, they encountered their first surprise: humanity's defenses. Unlike most species who concentrated their forces around their homeworld, the Terran Navy had spread its ships in a web across the system. It wasn't a defensive formation designed to repel an invasion, it was a net meant to ensnare and isolate. Valen frowned as he studied the arrangement. It was too precise, too deliberate. These humans weren't reacting to an invasion. They had been waiting for it. Interesting, Valen murmured to his second-in-command, Captain Vorin. They're not scrambling to meet us. They're posturing. Arrogance, Vorin replied. They think they can intimidate us with this display. Perhaps, Valen said, though doubt tugged at the edges of his mind. Or perhaps they're confident for a reason. The fleet continued its advance, undeterred. The human ships, sleek, black vessels with a faint blue glow, didn't retreat. They held their positions, silent and watchful. As the Empire's fleet crossed into the inner system, a message crackled across their comms. "Welcome to Sol," a calm human voice said. "This is Admiral Elena Calder of the Terran Navy. You are trespassing in sovereign Terran space. State your intentions." Valen smirked. "They dare to negotiate? Open a channel." The communication officer complied, and Valen leaned forward, his expression one of practiced authority. The screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Calder. She was young by the Empire's standards, her features sharp and her eyes sharp. Her uniform was immaculate, and she radiated a quiet confidence that was almost unsettling. "This is Grand Admiral Valen of the Galactic Empire," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your system is hereby annexed by imperial decree. Surrender your fleet and your worlds and you will be spared. Resist and you will be destroyed." Calder's lips twitched upward, forming the faintest hint of a smile. "Annexed, you say? Without so much as a handshake? How rude." Valen's smirk faltered. "This is not a negotiation, human." "Oh, I understand," Calder said, her tone light, almost playful. "You've come to conquer us. I just hope you're prepared for the consequences." The channel went silent, and Valen sat back in his chair, scowling. "Arrogant fools. Shall we engage?" Vorin asked. "Not yet," Valen replied. "Let them make the first move. I want to see what they're hiding." The Empire's fleet moved closer, their sensors scanning the human ships. They detected weapons, plasma cannons, railguns, missile bays, but nothing out of the ordinary. Yet something about the Terran fleet felt wrong. Their ships were too still, too precise. It was as if they were toying with the Empire, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, the humans acted. A single frigate broke formation, gliding toward the Imperial fleet. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the Empire's battleships, but it moved with an eerie grace. As it approached, it transmitted another message. "We don't want to destroy you," Calder's voice said, her tone almost regretful. "But if you insist on testing us, we'll oblige." The frigate stopped just outside firing range, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, a burst of energy erupted from its hull. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was an electromagnetic pulse, so powerful that it overloaded the sensors and shields of the nearest Imperial ships. In an instant, 3 cruisers were dead in the water, their systems fried. Valen shot to his feet. What is the meaning of this? They're using energy weapons, Vorin said, his voice tinged with disbelief. But that shouldn't be possible at this range. Impossible or not, they've made their move, Valen growled. All ships opened fire. The Empire's fleet unleashed a torrent of plasma and railgun fire, lighting up the void with a brilliant display of destruction. But the human ships were fast, too fast. They weaved through the onslaught with precision, their movements almost unnatural. And when they returned fire, their weapons struck with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, the Empire's fleet was in disarray. Ships exploded in bursts of fire and debris, their crews scrambling to regain control. Valen could hardly believe his eyes. These humans, who were supposed to be primitive and weak, were dismantling his fleet as if it were a training exercise. Retreat, he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Fall back to the outer system. The surviving ships obeyed, limping away from the battlefield. The humans didn't pursue. They simply returned to their formation, their ships as pristine as they had been at the start. As Valen watched the Terran fleet grow smaller on his view screen, he felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity wasn't just a challenge to the Empire. They were something else entirely, something that didn't fit into the Empire's understanding of the galaxy. They were toying with us, Vorin said quietly. Valen didn't reply. For the first time in his long career, he felt the unfamiliar sting of doubt. Humanity wasn't afraid of the Empire. They weren't desperate or defiant. They were amused. The remnants of the Imperial fleet regrouped near the orbit of Neptune, the battered ships drifting in the relative safety of the outer system. Grand Admiral Valen paced the command deck of his flagship, Eclipse Sovereign, his mind a storm of anger and confusion. The humans had inflicted a loss, on the Galactic Empire, something unheard of in his storied career. Damage report, he barked. Captain Vorin, still shaken from the encounter, stood at attention. 14 ships destroyed, 8 severely damaged, and dozens more with minor systems offline. Casualties are estimated at over 10,000, sir. The numbers grated against Valen's pride. And their losses? Vorin hesitated. None, sir. The Terran fleet remains intact. The words hung in the air like a death knell. None? Not a single human ship had been destroyed? Valen slammed a fist onto the arm of his command chair. Explain to me how this is possible, Captain. What are we dealing with? I don't know, Vorin admitted, his voice trembling slightly. Their ships are faster, more maneuverable, and their weapons, whatever they're using, are unlike anything we've encountered. It's as if they've bypassed the known laws of physics. Valen scowled. This was unacceptable. The Empire's doctrine was built on absolute superiority. Its ships, weapons, and tactics were unmatched across the galaxy. For centuries, no species had so much as posed a challenge. And yet, humanity had not only resisted but humiliated them. There had to be an explanation. Bring me every scrap of intelligence we have on these humans, he ordered. I want to know how they did this. As Vorin relayed the command, the bridge crew scrambled to compile data. Within moments, holographic displays lit up with reports, schematics, and intercepted transmissions. Valen studied them with a growing sense of unease. Humanity's technological progression was unusual. Most species developed along predictable lines, advancing step by step over millennia. But humans? They were an anomaly. Their progress had been chaotic, full of abrupt leaps and breakthroughs. In just a few centuries, they had gone from primitive combustion engines to faster-than-light travel. And then there was the gap, the mysterious century-long silence in their history, where no records existed. What happened during this period? Valen asked, pointing to the blank stretch in the timeline. No one knows, Vorin replied. When the humans re-emerged, they were different. More advanced, more unified. It's as if they underwent some kind of transformation, but the details are a mystery. Valen narrowed his eyes. A mystery indeed. And what about their fleet? How do they build such ships? Surely they lack the resources of the Empire. They do, Vorin said. But they've mastered something we haven't, efficiency. Their ships aren't just advanced, they're optimized. Every component serves a purpose. There's no excess, no waste. It's almost surgical. Valen leaned back, his mind racing. This wasn't just a matter of technology. Humanity's behavior, their confidence, their precision, suggested something deeper. They didn't fight like a species defending its homeworld. They fought like predators toying with their prey. While Valen pondered the implications, Admiral Elena Calder watched from her command ship, the TSV Aegis, as the remnants of the Imperial fleet regrouped at Neptune. The Terran fleet had returned to its original formation, silent and still. From an outside perspective, it might have seemed like a show of restraint. But within the Aegis, the mood was anything but passive. "Status?" Calder asked, her tone calm. "All systems operational," replied Commander Darius Ing, her second in command. "No damage sustained, no casualties reported." "Good." Calder nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Imperial fleet. "What's their next move?" Ing frowned. "Hard to say. They're regrouping, but they haven't retreated from the system. They might be planning another assault." "They'll hesitate," Calder said with certainty. "They've just learned their first lesson. Humanity isn't what they expected." Ing smirked. "You think they'll come back for a second lesson?" "They always do," Calder said. "Empires like theirs thrive on arrogance. They can't admit defeat, especially not to a species they consider beneath them. But they'll be cautious now. They'll probe, analyze, look for weaknesses." Ing glanced at her. "And when they find none?" Calder's faint smile returned. "That's when the real fun begins." Back on the Eclipse Sovereign, Valen was deep in thought when a transmission came through from Imperial High Command. The holographic image of Emperor Saphirian appeared before him, his golden robes shimmering with an unnatural glow. "Grand Admiral," the Emperor said, his voice cold and commanding. "I have received your initial report. Explain to me how a backwater species managed to inflict such a loss upon our fleet." Valen bowed his head. "Your Majesty, the humans are not what we anticipated. Their technology, their tactics, they are far more advanced than our initial assessment suggested." "Excuses?" Saphirian snapped. "The Empire does not tolerate failure, Valen. I sent you to crush these primitives, not to skulk at the edge of their system. With respect, Majesty, I believe we underestimated them. Humanity is no ordinary species. They are disciplined, resourceful, and confident. They've been preparing for us." Saphirian's eyes narrowed. "Then you will adjust. Reinforcements are already en route, including several of our Eviscerator-class dreadnoughts. You will return to Sol and bring these humans to their knees. Is that understood?" Valen clenched his fists. "Yes, Your Majesty." The transmission ended and Valen turned to Vorin. "Prepare the fleet. We're launching a second assault." "Sir," Vorin said hesitantly, "if I may, should we reconsider our approach?" The humans seemed to. "No," Valen interrupted. "We cannot afford to show weakness. We will overwhelm them with sheer force. They may have tricks up their sleeves, but they cannot withstand the full might of the Empire." Vorin nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. As he relayed the orders, Valen stared at the display of the Terran fleet, a cold determination settling over him. "Let's see how long that confidence of yours lasts," he muttered. On the Aegis, Calder watched as the Imperial fleet began to regroup. She could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken question on everyone's mind. "What now?" "Send the signal," she said quietly. Ing raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? We haven't even revealed our primary assets yet." "They're bringing reinforcements," Calder replied. "We need to escalate before they do." Ing nodded and sent the command. Moments later, a ripple of blue light spread across the Sol system as hidden stations, satellites, and stealth ships came online. The Terran Navy wasn't just a fleet, it was an interconnected web of advanced systems, designed to fight not just battles, but wars of attrition and strategy. As the web activated, Calder leaned back in her chair, her eyes glinting with anticipation. "Let them come," she murmured. "We'll show them what humanity really looks like." The Imperial reinforcements arrived with a flash of light and power, heralding the arrival of a fleet so massive it seemed to blot out the stars. Eviscerator-class dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, formed the backbone of the armada. Surrounding them were swarms of cruisers, frigates, and carriers, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to annihilate an entire sector. From his vantage point on the bridge of the Eclipse Sovereign, Grand Admiral Valen gazed at the reinforcements with renewed confidence. The Emperor had spared no expense in ensuring humanity's submission. This time there would be no mistakes, no hesitation, no mercy. "Status report," Valen commanded. "The reinforcements have fully integrated with our fleet," Captain Vorin replied. "We now have over 400 capital ships and 1,200 support vessels under our command. The humans are outnumbered 10 to 1. "Good," Valen said, his voice cold. "We will crush them with overwhelming force. No more probing or posturing. We will strike with everything we have. He turned to the tactical officer. Set a course for the Terran fleet. I want them eradicated. Meanwhile, deep within the Terran fleet, Admiral Calder watched the arrival of the Imperial reinforcements without so much as a flicker of concern. On the bridge of the TSV Aegis, her officers were calm, their movements deliberate. They had been expecting this. Looks like they brought the whole party, Commander Ing remarked, leaning casually against the edge of a console. Dreadnoughts, carriers, and more ships than I care to count. Impressive? Quantity isn't the same as quality, Calder replied, her tone measured. We've prepared for this. Ing smirked. Still, it's quite a sight. They really don't know what they're walking into, do they? No, Calder said, her lips curving into a faint smile. But they will soon. She activated the fleet-wide comms channel, her voice calm but firm. All ships, this is Admiral Calder. The Imperial fleet has brought reinforcements as expected. Maintain your positions and execute battle protocols as planned. This is the moment we've prepared for. Let's remind them why they shouldn't have come here. The acknowledgement signals came through, steady and confident. The Terran fleet moved into a tighter formation, their ships gliding into position with precise, almost mathematical efficiency. The outer layer consisted of smaller frigates and corvettes, designed for speed and agility. Behind them were the cruisers, their railguns and plasma arrays primed. At the core of the formation were the capital ships, including the Aegis, their hulls brimming with experimental weapons systems. Above and below the fleet, hundreds of stealth drones and automated platforms waited silently, cloaked in the shadows of space. They were the Terran Navy's ace in the hole, a vast network of autonomous combat units, capable of acting independently or as an extension of the human fleet. The two forces converged near the orbit of Mars, the void between them crackling with tension. On the Eclipse Sovereign, Valen watched the human fleet on the main display, his lips curling into a sneer. They're holding their position, he said. Fools. They think they can repel us with such a small force. It could be a trap, Vorin cautioned. Their formation is unusual. It's too deliberate. It doesn't matter, Valen replied. No trap can withstand the sheer might of the Empire. All ships prepare to engage. Target their capital ships first and collapse their formation. The Imperial fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of fire and steel. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs lit up the void as the first volleys were exchanged. The Terran fleet responded in kind, their weapons precise and devastating. Ships on both sides danced through the chaos, their shields flaring under the onslaught. But something was different this time. The humans weren't simply reacting to the Imperial assault, they were controlling the flow of battle. Their ships moved with uncanny coordination, exploiting gaps in the Imperial lines and isolating vulnerable targets. Every maneuver seemed calculated, every shot deliberate. What are they doing? Valen muttered, his eyes narrowing. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They're predicting us, Vorin said, his voice filled with unease. It's as if they know what we're going to do before we do it. That's impossible, Valen snapped. No one can predict a battle of this scale. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. The Imperial fleet was faltering, its formations unraveling under the relentless precision of the Terran Navy. Even the dreadnoughts, which were supposed to be impervious to conventional weapons, were struggling to hold their ground. Their shields flickered under sustained bombardment, and their massive guns struggled to hit the nimble Terran ships. On the Aegis, Calder watched the battle unfold with calm satisfaction. Her fleet was performing exactly as planned, executing maneuvers that had been drilled into them countless times. Phase 1 complete, Ing reported. The Imperial fleet is destabilized. Shall we proceed to Phase 2? Calder nodded. Deploy the drones? Across the battlefield, the Terran stealth drones came to life, emerging from the darkness like shadows given form. They were small, fast, and nearly invisible to enemy sensors. As they swarmed into the fray, they targeted the weak points of the Imperial ships, engine exhaust, sensor arrays, and shield generators. Within moments, dozens of Imperial vessels were crippled, their systems overwhelmed by the precision strikes. At the same time, the Terran fleet shifted into a new formation, encircling the Imperial forces. It wasn't a traditional encirclement meant to trap the enemy, it was a dynamic, shifting pattern designed to confuse and disorient. The Imperial ships couldn't find a clear target, their weapons firing wildly into empty space. On the Eclipse Sovereign, Valen's frustration boiled over. How are they doing this? How are they outmaneuvering us? They've turned the battlefield into a three-dimensional grid, Vorin said, his voice grim. They're not just fighting us, they're controlling us. Every move we make plays into their strategy. Valen slammed his fist onto the console. Then we'll break their grid. Order the dreadnoughts to concentrate fire on their flagship. If we take it out, the rest will crumble. The dreadnoughts complied, unleashing a torrent of firepower at the Aegis. But as the beams and projectiles closed in, the Terran flagship vanished, its cloaking systems activating with perfect timing. The Imperial weapon struck empty space, and moments later the Aegis reappeared on the other side of the battlefield, its guns blazing. "They're playing with us," Vorin whispered, his face pale. "They're toying with us." Valen's eyes burned with rage. "I will not be mocked by these primitives. Order all ships to..." Before he could finish, an alert blared across the bridge. The holographic display lit up with dozens of red markers, Terran reinforcements emerging from hidden positions throughout the system. It wasn't just a fleet. It was an armada. Calder's voice crackled over the comms, her tone as calm and confident as ever. "Grand Admiral Valen, I warned you about the consequences of your actions. But you didn't listen. Now you'll see what happens when you challenge humanity." The display flickered, showing the full scope of the Terran forces. For the first time, Valen felt a cold stab of fear. The humans hadn't been fighting at full strength. They had been holding back. And now the game was over. The void of space erupted into chaos as the full might of the Terran Navy descended upon the Imperial fleet. Waves of reinforcements surged from hidden locations across the Sol system, their sleek, angular forms bristling with unorthodox weapons and shimmering energy fields. What had begun as a calculated battle now evolved into an overwhelming display of power and precision. The Imperial ships, once so dominant, now fought desperately to hold their formation. The Eviscerator-class dreadnoughts unleashed their devastating plasma cannons, their massive barrels glowing with energy as they fired blast after blast. But their shots were intercepted by Terran countermeasures, kinetic barriers, pulse disruptors, and, most unnervingly, weapons that bent space itself. Beams of Imperial fire curved harmlessly around Terran ships or dissipated into nothingness, as if the very fabric of reality refused to cooperate. On the Eclipse Sovereign, Grand Admiral Valen was at his breaking point. Alarms blared across the bridge and reports flooded in from all sides. Dreadnought Starbreaker destroyed. Cruiser Wings 4 through 7 annihilated. "Our left flank is collapsing," a panicked officer cried. Valen gripped the railing of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Order the fleet to regroup. Focus fire on their core formation. Bring them down." "But sir," Captain Vorin stammered, "their core formation is a diversion. Their real attack is coming from..." A deafening explosion rocked the Eclipse Sovereign, cutting Vorin off. The holographic display flickered and went dark for a moment before resetting to show the devastating truth. The Terran fleet had surrounded them. "This isn't a battle anymore," Vorin said, his voice hollow. "It's a slaughter." Admiral Calder watched the scene unfold from the command deck of the Aegis, her expression calm but resolute. The Terran fleet was executing its final maneuvers, systematically dismantling the once mighty Imperial Armada. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their focus unshaken. "They're crumbling," Ing said, watching as one of the last Eviscerator-class dreadnoughts exploded in a brilliant burst of light. "We've broken their lines completely?" Calder nodded. "They relied on brute force and fear. Both are meaningless against us." She opened a channel to the Imperial fleet, her voice echoing across their comms. "Grand Admiral Valen, this is Admiral Calder of the Terran Navy. Your forces are decimated. Your reinforcements are shattered. Surrender now, and we will spare what remains of your fleet." On the Eclipse Sovereign, Valen seethed with rage. His pride screamed at him to fight to the bitter end, to take as many humans down with him as possible. But the cold reality of the situation was inescapable. His fleet was in ruins, his reinforcements obliterated. The Galactic Empire had never faced a defeat like this, not in its thousands of years of existence. "This can't be," he whispered, sinking into his command chair. His empire, his legacy, was crumbling before his eyes. "Sir," Vorin said quietly, "if we surrender, some of us might survive. If we don't..." Valen closed his eyes. Every fiber of his being hated the thought of bowing to these upstarts, but survival was the only option left. With a heavy heart, he opened a channel to the Terran flagship. "This is Grand Admiral Valen of the Galactic Empire," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We surrender." The Terran fleet ceased fire, their ships forming a perfect defensive perimeter around the surviving Imperial vessels. Calder allowed herself a small smile as she received Valen's surrender. Wise choice, she said. Stand by for boarding instructions. Your crews will be treated fairly. She ended the transmission and turned to Ing, prepare the fleet for post-battle operations. I want salvage crews out there within the hour. Ing raised an eyebrow. Just like that? We're not celebrating? Calder shook her head. This isn't a victory to celebrate. It's a statement. They'll be back, empires always are. But next time, they'll think twice before underestimating humanity. Far away in the halls of the Galactic Empire's High Command, the news of the defeat rippled through the ranks like a shockwave. Emperor Saphirian stood in stunned silence as the reports played on the grand holographic displays before him. Images of shattered dreadnoughts, retreating Imperial ships, and the unyielding Terran fleet filled the air. How? He muttered, his voice barely audible. How could they do this? No one dared answer him. The truth was evident in every frame, every report. Humanity was no longer a backwater species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. Something the Empire had never encountered before. Saphirian turned to his advisors, his golden robes swirling around him like a storm. Send a message to every corner of the Empire. Humanity must be studied, analyzed, understood. We must know how they did this. And what of the Terrans, Your Majesty? One advisor asked cautiously. What should our official response be? The Emperor's eyes narrowed. We watch, we wait, and we prepare. This war isn't over. It has only just begun. Back in the Sol system, humanity stood victorious but vigilant. The battle had proven what they already knew. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and filled with threats. But it had also proven something far more important. Humanity was ready. As the Aegis and her fleet moved to secure the system, Calder looked out at the wreckage of the Imperial fleet. She felt no triumph, only a steely resolve. They came here thinking we were weak, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. But they've learned the truth now. Ing turned to her, a question in his eyes. And what is that truth? Calder's gaze didn't waver. That humanity doesn't just survive. We endure. We adapt. And when the galaxy comes for us, we don't run. We fight. The stars burned brightly in the distance, silent witnesses to a new chapter in galactic history.